Yes, I know. And so this in a week, I almost always start off with a tiny little recap. Okay? So this is now my tiny little recap. So we were looking at the palette of Norma. Sorry? I hit play. No, I hit record. Wouldn't help to hit play. Yeah. We were looking at the palette of Norma. It was buried with Norma, as most of our objects from ancient Egypt are burial objects, and it is a makeup palette, right? On the opposite side, which we haven't seen yet, we're not done with them yet. On the opposite side, we'll see the indentation where one puts the makeup. But on this side, we see Norma taking credit for having unified Upper and Lower Egypt as the first of the, what we might call the pharaohs, right? That period when we don't have separate civilizations, but they have come together. And he is represented as the king of Upper Egypt because he's wearing the white crown of Upper Egypt, right? The white crown of Upper Egypt on his head, that bowling pin-shaped crown. So he's appearing to us, in retrospect, as the leader of Upper Egypt, which is down on the map, right, upriver. And he is striking on the head, defeating the people of Lower Egypt. The guy on his knees is meant to be a representative for all of the people of Lower Egypt, and he is defeating them. His servant is behind him, holding his sandals on his arm, as we saw a week ago. Part of this is to show that this is a holy event, I think, a ritualized version. In other words, it's not showing us history per se, right? But rather it is showing us the sort of symbolic version of that. And that's driven home by what's directly in front of him, which is Horus, right? The god of Upper Egypt, standing triumphant over a representation of the people of Lower Egypt that's even more metaphoric or symbolic than just the guy on his knees. So here is Horus wearing the white crown of Upper Egypt in composite with the red crown of Lower Egypt, which we'll talk about in a second. And that's what we see there, holding a leash, probably, or tether or something, running through a ring on that guy's nose. And you'll notice that that strange figure there has very similar features to the guy that's on his knees. So they're meant to be paired up, right? So what we're seeing here is a symbolic version of what the center shows. Upper Egypt defeats Lower Egypt. And we know it's Lower Egypt because of the papyrus flowers there, which grow more extensively in the delta region of Lower Egypt and become the symbolic flower of the north, right, of Lower Egypt. And our head growing out of the mud there is meant to be a representation of those people, right? So that's what we're seeing on this one side. Hathor up above, the mother of the pharaohs, more defeated down below, but he's claiming this victory for himself. We know historically he probably didn't do this himself. We know that historically this took place over many generations, but hey, he's bragging to the gods, right? He's going to get buried with this thing anyway. He's showing off that this is something that he's claiming responsibility for. Yeah. That's a good question. I don't think Horus always wears the crown. That was just in that one particular image he did. We'll see Horus again in just a few minutes in a different work of art. But I don't know enough of that just to say how common it is for him to wear a crown, right? And so here, rather, he's just, there's that carrot, right, going on. Okay, that's the other side of this. And you can see that, again, it has Hathor up above, just like we saw below, or on the reverse. And there's that well in the center here for the makeup, right? And as you might imagine, it's a difficult thing to carry for just doing that, right? Not particularly practical, and that's the whole point, is it's not meant to be practical. And can you find Narmer on this side? At the top of where on the top? Top left, right? How do you know? Right, hieratic scale, right? We've talked about this a number of times. The most important figure is the largest figure. So the greater you are, the bigger you are. Okay. I'm just normal size, right? And LeBron James, you know, more important than me. Okay, so that's him. He's got a different hat on there, doesn't he? Right? Well, it doesn't really look like a bowling pin, though, you know? That one tapers and then folds up again, and this one here, and it's got that pigtail curly tail, right? But this shape here is really not very much the same as that shape exactly. And I got some nice details of this, right? So there he is. And you'll notice he's got his little servant behind him again, still carrying the sandals on his arm. Because again, this is a ritualized object. He's still got in his hand that same king's scepter that he was beating the crap out of that guy with on the other side, right? To go back, right? He's got that exact same thing in his hand. But he's not using it as a weapon anymore. He's just carrying it around with him and walking. And you'll notice in his other hand, he has a whip, right? There's that coming up with the tassels coming off of it. This is a symbol of sort of the sternness of his government, right? The whip as something like, hey, you're going to do this or else, right? It's like Dad and the ruler. I don't know if your dad's like that, but my dad was only was really a real shit if he ever like that, right? But that's what that's symbolic for. We see it in Pharaoh all the time. We're carrying the flail. Did we see this before with Osiris? Yeah, we saw it with Osiris carried it too, as well as the crook, right? The shepherd's crook. Because one is carrying, bringing you back in a relatively gentle way. The other one is like, hey, get that or else, right? And these are the two elements of the Pharaoh's character, right? The king's character. So here he's carrying it because, again, this is all about military victory. So that's why he has just the one, right? You mean directly behind Silva? No. I think it's a hieroglyph. I can't tell you exactly what it is. But the Lord's Flower almost always looks exactly the same. It's kind of like a tulip, right? So it's not it, and you'll get kind of used to seeing it, right? In the way that it appears. But that's not it, because it almost always appears from the side. Oh yeah, like a top view of it or something, yeah. I don't think so. But I'm not immediate. Remember, they wouldn't let me into that class as much as I wanted to. Now here, the crown is actually identifiable. It's the red crown of Lower Egypt. So now, after having defeated the people of Lower Egypt and turned around to the back, we see him now taking on their leader's costume, right? He's defeated them. He is now their leader. And can you tell me what he's doing there on this side? On the other side, he's kicking the heck out of somebody. What's he doing here? Leading? Well, he's really taking part in some sort of procession, right? He's walking like an Egyptian, as the Bengals once said, right? With one leg out. That's the same close he's calling on the side. You can still see the ox's tail coming off the back of his kilt, right? And he seems to be walking forward as the other people are. So there's this idea that leading or taking part in, right? He's not really leading. He's behind everybody else, isn't he? So taking part in some sort of procession. You'll notice the figures in front of him have those sticks with symbols on top of them. Poles. These are military standards, right? Part of that procession. And one of the online 10-minute things talked about the standard of Ur, right? As being something that was on top of a pole for a ritual procession. So that's what he's doing here. But where are they proceeding to? Where are they going? What are they doing? Here's a nice detail of them. And you can see those look like lotus flowers. The guy right in front of him. Those droopy things coming over his shoulders look like little stars too. Mm-hmm. Can you look at what's going on in the upper right corner beneath the cake over there? What are those things over there? Those dead bodies with their heads cut off. Right? So it's kind of like that, but at the same time what he's doing is he's going to go look at the bodies of the dead. Right? He's reviewing the defeated enemy. And they have been arranged, and again, being Egyptian art, we have the ground plane, and then just like the foodstuffs that we saw in burial, some of the burial art, where they're stacked up, so you can see them all, right? We have the bodies also stacked up, so it's almost like we're seeing them from the top. And they've been laid there, feet akimbo, their arms bound, and their heads cut off. So this is very much the ritual humiliation and defeat of the enemy that we also saw in the standard at Ur, right? And again, certain ideas being played out in these different cultures. It's not a violent scene. And my guess is those must be representations of Hathor up there at the top as well. So this procession, so it's not necessarily happening now, but it's a peaceful thing. Although I guess bodies Christ is killed again today for your sins, so it's not necessarily all that peaceful, but yeah, I think, or when you graduate, watch what happens when we all walk in with our caps and gowns, right? There's somebody up there front with the big silver thing for Mary now, right? So it's not just some of that. Notice the boat up above, too, the idea of the afterlife there, right? So, Narmer reviewing the dead and going to look at these very violent bodies of the people that he's defeated. So it's not enough to defeat them, he's going to make a show of it as well, right? So he's reviewing that. Down below, we see Hathor again, and she is destroying another of these enemies, stomping on them, very much like what we saw Narmer doing on the other side. Notice that the enemy is naked as well, and makes a point of showing him naked. Nakedness has very different symbolisms in ancient art. Sometimes it can be a way of demeaning someone. Sometimes it can be a way of showing ritual servanthood, like what we saw in the park. Sometimes, in very early civilizations, we see it as a way of being closer to the power of nature itself. Now, in this particular case, it's about defeat and humiliation. Just as it... Yeah, that's the enemy down below, being stomped by Hathor. Because Hathor, the whole point of him having his sandals up, right, is that the gods are on the side of Narmer, right? Narmer's doing God's will, or Hathor's will, of God's will. And so Hathor here is goring the enemy and stomping on it in the same way that Narmer has already done so, right? On the right, that's meant to be a sort of schematic, I believe, of a portrait there. And then finally in the center, we have the fantastic long-necked leopard being held at bay with ropes by these two servant figures. What do you suppose the symbolism here is? With these two necks. Right. Yeah, they haven't been united yet, right? We can't really talk about reuniting. But yeah, the intertwined necks, and you notice that the neck of the one on the right is in front at the bottom, and then behind up above, and vice versa, right? They're not just overlapping, but they're intertwined, is meant as a symbol of the previously warring parts of Egypt, now together and held in check, right? By the two figures with the pieces around the necks. Right? So the Paladin Narmer claims for Narmer something that probably Narmer didn't do, but wants to be remembered for having done, which is to unify Egypt. And it ushers in, right around this time, right around 3000 BC, it ushers in the era of the pharaohs, which lasts for almost 3,000 years, right? Up until they're overthrown by the Romans. And because its history is so long, as with dynasty after dynasty of pharaohs, and we don't have intervening groups like we did in Mesopotamia, where we talked about the Akkadians, the Assyrians, the Sumerians, or the Babylonians. Historians tend to break it up into sort of four major groups, which I'm not going to bother you with. Right? Suffice to say that the earliest group are our pyramid builders, the famous Great Pyramids outside of Cairo. It's part of what's historically called the Old Kingdom. Right? There's a new kingdom where they stop burying in pyramids and start burying in caves instead. That's the major difference between the Old Kingdom and the New Kingdom. Right? And then there's the later sort of Roman period, after Rome has overthrown Egypt, installed their own leader of Egypt and started to sort of incorporate all the Egyptian things. Right? So this ushers in the beginning of the Old Kingdom, the earliest period. Right? And if you're really into this stuff, they separate it further into dynasties based on family trees. Right? So here's where my notes. I've got Princess Loki, and so I'm going to get to what's coming up next. I wanted to talk a little bit about Egyptian set of proportions for the human body. And you'll notice this one's in the intro to your textbook, and there's none on the other side, how Egyptian body proportions are really similar. And the poses tend to be fairly redundant in relief sculptures like this. A relief sculpture is where it's not carved totally in the round, right? It looks like it's just been impressed on the surface. And you'll notice that in every one of them, we have the shoulders seen from the front, the face seen in profile, the hips seen in profile, and the legs apart, right? It's the same pose. And you'll also notice that the shoulders are really broad, and the waist tends to be very, very thin, as do the hips. And the feet tend to be kind of big, right? I was like, remember one year I was teaching this, and it was during the Summer Olympics, right? And I was thinking that this is nice stuff, you know? Tiny people, they always said they had the perfect body to be an Olympic gold medal swimmer because they had great big shoulders, really strong upper body strength, tiny little waist, and these flipper feet, like size 17, you know, which just gave them that much extra in the water. And that's exactly what the Egyptians looked like. For them, this was the perfect set of proportions for the human body. And it was important for them, especially in images of the Pharaoh, to show him fit for all time. Because the belief was that the land would be fertile if the Pharaoh was fit. That the fortune of Egypt was indelibly tied to the ongoing fitness of the Pharaoh. And since the Pharaoh inherited power, you didn't get elected Pharaoh, right? You became Pharaoh because your father was Pharaoh, or you're the closest male relative to the previous Pharaoh, right? Because of that, the fact that you inherited, you had it for life, they would actually have a ritual, we'll talk about it a little bit, where they had to prove the fitness of the Pharaoh. After something like 12 years on the throne, maybe 18, I can't remember exactly, they started to run this sort of biennial thing where the Pharaoh had to prove that he was still fit enough to continue being Pharaoh. And what we find in images of the Pharaoh is that he's shown young and fit no matter what. We don't see him old. We don't see him fat. We might see other Egyptians fat, right? But we don't see the Pharaoh old and fat. So in other words, it's not a realistic portrait of him, but it's one that's based on a set of idealized proportions. You know what I mean when I would say the word idealized? In other words, if I were to say, okay, how are our bodies the same? Right? Heck with it. You know, my shoulders ratio to my head maybe is different than yours is, right? But okay, look, they just don't look like this instead. And just come up with one standard set of proportions that we use. That's what happens in ancient Egypt. So what you could do in Egyptian art, and many people have done this, is to go back through and sort of say, okay, how many hand units is the forearm? How many hand units is the body? How high is the waist? And you can see that it's pretty consistent, right? And when we talk about that, it's important when we talk about style to talk about the fact that it's not always the same. Now, the pose is similar. When we look back at ancient Mesopotamian art, you see that the poses are quite similar, right? Shoulders seen from the side, or from the front, hips from the side, face from the side, legs apart. But look at the different proportions that our Mesopotamian figures have. Look at how much thicker the arms and legs are. He's not stumpy, but he's certainly, he's on steroids, you know? He's bulky in a really prominent way, such that just based on style alone, having never seen it, I might be able to show you an Egyptian work of art that you've never seen before. And you say, that's Egyptian. Not just because he's wearing that helmet, but because of the proportions of the body. And the same thing would hold true, I think, for Mesopotamian work, because of the way in which they articulate. Now, there's a lot of similarities. They're both obviously very interested in the muscles around the knees and the calves. right? But if you look at those, he's sinewy, right? He's elongated and stretched. He's built, Narmer or Ephemer, are built like swimmers or track stars, right? And our Mesopotamians, because they're built like weightlifters, right, or wrestlers. They just have that bulk and mass. When we talk about style, right, this is one of the things that's often surprisingly hard for me at least, for students to pick up, is that there are these styles that are typical for particular regions and periods. Right? And that Egyptian style looks very, very similar through most of its history. It changes, minor changes here and there, we'll see some of them. But for the most part, it stays rather consistent this way. This is their perfected set of proportions that we see everywhere we look. Now, the next thing about being in presenter view here is I actually see the next slide from the other side. Heck with notes, right? But here we are looking at the pyramids. During this first period of, and by the way, look at how far we've jumped already. 500 years, right there. Right? Otherwise, we'll be here all semester. But our earliest pyramid builders were part of this sort of first group, this old kingdom of Egyptian art. And there's a 10-minute art fix that talks about the pyramids, but some of the earliest ones look like steps, like what you see on the right. And they later became smooth-sided, although as you can see in the foreground, not consistently so. Right? And what the pyramids were of course, burial sites. And originally, with Imhotep as the artist here, the architect, which is by the way also named Boris Karloff in the original mummy from 1932, named was Imhotep II. But the pharaoh Zoser had him design an entire burial complex, and the pyramid sat at the center of a group of buildings that were used for the burial. That included often an entire recreation of the pharaoh's palace. Because if he's going to live forever, right, the mummy and whatnot, he's going to live forever, he's going to have a place to live forever. Sorry? And people that built them, again, and you rule with God on your side, right? You're the earthly embodiment of the God. It's much easier to get everybody to do exactly what you want them to. Originally, and this is true for the set pyramid of Zoser, originally the burial chamber was actually in the ground underneath the pyramid. And the pyramid became this metaphor for ascending to the heavens to be with Ra, the sun god. And the set pyramid makes a perfect case, right? It's, Led Zeppelin, Stairway to Heaven, right? And they eventually became smooth-sided, like what we see with the Great Pyramids of Giza, and they were originally even smoother sided than this. But again, this is like the rays of the sun coming down, from what we see in perspective, how they can spread out through the clouds when you have clouds. And so they have that same idea of sending us up towards heaven itself. Originally, these three pyramids were staked with very smooth, polished limestone. And that's been stolen by a subsequent generation, put to other uses, and only a small amount of it exists here at the top. Right? So the rubble that you see here, you would not have seen originally. It was smoother than that. And we'll talk about this with the online architects, but they abandoned the idea of burying underground with the Great Pyramid because these things just became a big old secure sign, on the side of the freeway. Like, dig here, you'll find stuff, And so these came up with a rather interesting system of trying to fool the thieves into thinking that someone else had already been there. That didn't work. But that's the idea. So they ended up putting those two in the center of the thing rather than the thieves. So the pyramid builders are part of this early period of Egyptian history. Now, like I said, my notes are all screwed up. And the Great Pyramids are the pyramids of a father, a son, and a grandson. Right? So they're a successive dynasty of three kings. So Khufu built the first one of them, and it is the largest of the three. It doesn't look like a pyramid because it's further in the distance, right? But it is taller than the center one. It's also missing all of its limestone sheathing around the outside, which also would have covered the holes into it so you can find out about where things are. His son was Caspra, built the second one. And his grandson, Mencorme, built the third one, which is significantly smaller. Like about a third or a fourth as tall as Caspra's. But again, where we are, the photographer is here, since it's close to us, it looks a lot bigger. And all of the other pyramids that you see are for other members of the family. Right? So, but those are our three principal pyramid builders. And have you ever been to Cairo? Pretty much I'm sitting at the Holiday Inn here. Right? I mean, it's just right there. Right? I haven't been there since I was 21 years old. So 81. When I was 30, almost 35 years. It's very tough. And I was my very first year ever. Right? And I've been walking around the pyramids all day, and I sit down and they have a Stella art stuff at the Holiday Inn. It's basically that picture right there, maybe a little bit over to the right. But the only thing it looked like is out in the middle of the desert, so it really isn't. Right? It's just right there. There's a sound and light show. Okay. But nonetheless, originally it was because we're on the other side of the Nile here. Right? And originally the pharaoh would have been carried across the Nile in boats like what we saw before. Series of rituals that take place before his body was actually interred inside the pyramid. Right? And each of our three pyramids is part of a broader complex of buildings. Now these ones, unlike Imhotep's pyramid for Zoser, they don't recreate the palace per se, but rather they have temples that were used as part of the burial ritual. Right? And we're going to look at those next. Yeah. No. I don't know if any of these three bodies still survive. I just don't know. We'll talk at the very end of tonight about the burial ritual, how it all worked out, right? Because it's rather complicated. And I mean complicated in a kind of fascinating way. It's complex. Not complicated, it's complex, right? And but the problem is it involved a lot of gold and finery, and that's very attractive things to steal. And so heck with the body, you know, the Torquah wandering around forever with nowhere to go. Right. So, okay, let's just come in there. Or even before then, yeah, well, this is an interesting thing. I think I give some statistics, I don't have them memorized, right, in the artifacts online, but something like they had to get, in order to build this, because we think that they were built roughly in, the pharaoh's reign was about 25 years. 25, 30 years. And somebody did the calculations because they are solid stone, right? It's not like when we build buildings now, we put up a steel frame and then make it look like stone by hanging stone on the outside of it. This is solid, right? Solid stone. And the biggest one's like about 2 tons, about the size of a large, you know, the weight of a large pickup truck, right? They're big, and there's some good pictures on this. But someone looked at the calculations, and I think that they had to drop one of these 2-ton stones in place, I want to say like every 30 seconds to get them done in 30 years. We're working 24/7, you know? Just a stone that's, you know, the size of a pickup truck. And it's pretty incredible feat of engineering, right? And it wasn't entirely slaves. There were workers as well. We know how to see some of the burial sites of the workers. Fairly recently. Recently it was always just, you know, slaves from other countries that have been brought, like the poor guys that Norman stepped on, that didn't get pissed off, got fucked in there. But we now know they actually had, in addition to slave labor, artisans working for them as well. Right? Which one are you looking at? Just this slide, or?
Yeah, so like the first one was like smooth, and then
they were all smoother. They all had this on them originally, right? And coming all the way down to the bottom, right? The reason this one looks smoother is it's different than this one. It's pretty much the same size stone in all three, right? This one is so much closer to us, right? There's about 4 or 5 football fields between here and here.
But they're all like stacked like this one.
Yeah, but again, they've always been smooth edged, like that one. Right? So what we're seeing here is the core of the building and the outside, which is the finer stone. Right? I built it all from the planks, and you can build some of this from rougher stone, and put the more simple stone around the outside. That's all missing, right? That's all been taken by someone else and put to some other purpose. I'd love if somebody could put that together to figure out where it is now, right? What church is it decorating, or what statue was carved from some of that finer stone on the outside. Right? So originally they would have looked like the one in Vegas, right? Going off glass. I mean, they would have looked sharper edged, shinier originally, right? Which is pretty amazing to think about, as opposed to what they look like now, right? So, but the stone sizes are basically the same in all three of the course. Now, like I said, each one of the three was part of a broader complex of buildings. If we were seeing them and get a better sense of scale, I think. And also, I think you can get a sense of how that smooth stone would have appeared originally, right, in the center one. But you can now see Mount Kores on the far left is how much smaller it is. But you'll notice that the center one, we can see all of the complex here. Each one of the pyramids is in a slight rise of Nile down here, right? And beautiful Roman stuff. And as it came across, there would have been a causeway that came in here originally. Water would have been here. Also here in the contemplative bit. And this is where the original part of the burial ceremony took place, would be the valley of. And then from there's a pathway. This is our. Forget that. There's a covered causeway for a procession that led from the baptism floor up to a secondary temple that's right at the base of the pyramid, where the final preparation of the pharaoh took place before he was actually buried himself. And each of the three has the same basic layout, right? Valley temple, causeway, avenue, and then the actual ritual temple. I think we can't take this out of the picture, but each one of them has that, right? And let's see what's coming up here. That's the valley temple. And the mortuary temple, right? Nicely animated, right? And immediately adjacent to the Valley Temple down below is something you've all seen somewhere before, which is the Great Sphinx. Sitting immediately adjacent to the Valley Temple of Khafra's pyramid. This makes us think that it's probably a portrait of Khafra, but again, portraiture is not what we might think of portraiture as being. It doesn't necessarily have to look like him. And what we'll see when we see his son is there's a strong family resemblance, but it could just be that that was considered to be the ideal style at the time. So the Great Sphinx is there at the foot of the Valley Temple of Khafra's pyramid. Sam. What's the what? Mortuary temple. Right. Now you'll notice that what we have here is a figure with a human head and a lion's body. You can see it's laying down in the paws in the foreground and background. I have a view from the side as well, so you can see the tail wrapping around the back. It's mostly carved out of live rock. In other words, instead of bringing rocks here to build it up like temples, like the pyramids were, they carved it out of the ground itself. Okay? And up to about this level. It's carved immediately out of the ground, and then they built the head on top of it. And you can see as we look around the sides, right, that in fact, you can see the live ground that's carved from it, how there's the same levels of striations that were there in the actual ground itself. The wear that we see on it, the damage that we see to it comes from, you'll notice it's not very badly damaged down here. It's pretty good at the bottom of the feet. Then it's pretty horrible. And then it's pretty good again. And that's all because of the way the sand moves across the desert. It's sandblast, right? And the first thing it did was to fill in this quarry that protected it down to here. Black is this way. This is up above where the sand's flowing, right? So the way in which it survived centuries accounts for the damage that's been seen to it. What's the figure doing there? Why did they bother to make this thing right next to the Valley Temple? To protect it, exactly. And we saw later figures, right? These Lamasa figures at Assyrian palaces, which are also human-headed animals, standing guard at very prominent points. But dating 1,800 years later, is there some sort of interconnection between these two different cultures? I think that certainly is the case. And in both of them, the head is wearing the crown of that particular leader. We'll talk more about the standard pharaoh crown that when I was a kid I used to make out of a towel. You know, it was very easy to do for Halloween. We'll talk more about that in just a second. But in each of these, we're meant to associate this as being the king, the ruler, marshaling the power of nature itself. Because they're not choosing, I don't know, choose a wimpy animal. Right. They're not wimpy animals. Not like a kitten. It's a lion, right? Or in this, on the right, a winged bull. Right? This is nature itself controlled by this. What we think now is that it's the logic of the pharaoh, the logic of the leader, controlling the power of nature itself. It's got both of these things together, right? Intelligence and raw power. And the whole point of having a human-headed lion is exactly to get that point across. Right? In the same way that it's true for the Lamasa figure. Yeah?
So, I know that this is ancient, like, on guard and stuff, but that was resting
Good, that's a good question. I don't know. But I think on my feet here a little bit, right? When we talk about what, here's what I hear in your question. Somebody taught me this a long time ago. You don't know the answer to something, make something else up. What I see in your question, and this is the other thing, rephrase the question in the way that you can. What I hear in your question is, what makes that one standing and this one sitting down? And when we talk about why artists make the choices they do, sometimes the motivation is entirely guided by symbolism. That's where your question is coming from. But sometimes it's also guided by the medium with which they're working, right? It's a quarry, and this is some of the stones that are used in the pyramids came out of this quarry. So the idea of him being down on his haunches for something that is, 80 feet long versus 12 feet tall, right, is dictated by the stuff they have to work with, When we teach studio art classes, we say, let the medium also dictate how you're treating it. Don't try to make clay do something it simply can't do. You've got to work with it. So that's my formal answer. That's my data. Now, like I said, we don't have anywhere in Egyptian mythology where we have human-headed lions. We have quite a few representations of lion-headed humans. There's a wonderful statue of Sekhmet up at the Walters in Baltimore, and with Madame Trowbridge in the background, you get a sense of how tall they are, right? How big they are. You come up to knee level in these, right? And so lion-headed humans are one thing. Sekhmet is a lion-headed human. We have dog-headed people, right? But the idea of a human head, it doesn't come out of Egyptian mythology. I can't tell you that, this is a representation of X, Y, or Z god or goddess, right? It rather is this idea of the intelligence of the pharaoh controlling the power of nature, right? I wanted to look at Sekhmet closely here. In this particular one, this ferocity of the lion makes Sekhmet a very great protector against evil. And this one stood outside of the temple. It's actually not burial. It's one of the Walters Art Museum. And it holds a sign of life in its hand, the Egyptian ankh. That's that key-shaped cross, right, with a loop on the end of it in its hand. You'll notice that it holds that in one hand and the other hand laying flat on its lap. We'll get to see a Sekhmet over in Rome. They've got one from the exact same temple in the Vatican Museum in Rome. So this is something that we'll have a chance to look at over there as well. And I thought so long as we're here, we may as well just show it to you. But like I said, there's no human-headed lion in Egyptian mythology whatsoever. So the Sphinx is not meant to be a god, right, per se, but rather this representation of power for the pharaoh and standing guard. I think this is a good time to take a break because I'm getting sick of not really knowing what's going on next and I know something about Prince and Proper. So I'll spend a few minutes here talking to people that wanted to have a different partner than what I said. Let's come back about 20 after. That'll give you the longest break, right? And that'll give me a chance to get my thing printed properly, right? Okay, so I'll see you 20 after by that clock. Whatever. Thank you. You learned something, right? No. If I'm mocking you, I think you probably know it. Oh, yeah, that's upside down. That's why I was like, here we are. Okay, so we were looking at the Let me in on it. What? Did you fart? Moving on. Moving back to Egypt, we were looking at these statues of Sekhmet from. It's a little different from when you took it. I got more local works of art in here, so it's not exactly the same. Here we go. We were looking at these statues of Sekhmet, one of them from the Walter Art Museum, and one of them from Rome in the Vatican collections, and we were talking about the fact that these are goddesses, right? But the Sphinx is not. Yeah. And there's a few things here that are going to come up and hit us again in just a second, especially the one that's at the Walters. And that is that on the sides of it, there is entwined inscription of two flowers that are wrapped around a central staff. Right? So you can see this here, right? There's a staff in the middle here with a T on the top of it, right? This is on the side of her. Sorry, the eraser. This is right here. Okay? So on the side of Sekhmet is this, and erase all ink on slide. And you can see that it's got these entwined flowers that do that around that central, and there are a lotus and papyrus flower. So it's the exact same symbolism we just saw in the Palace of Narmer, right? Where these metaphors of Upper and Lower Egypt having come together as one, shown on the side. And in fact, there's an inscription on the base of this particular Sekhmet statue, actually the cherubim, in the Walters, that says that it praises Ra. Remember Ra, the sun god? It praises him as the Lord of the two lands. So it's still making reference back to that foundation story of ancient Egypt, that it was Upper and Lower Egypt that had come together. The thing that Narmer claimed credit for. Right? It's still here. This is 1,700 years later. It's still part of their foundation mythology, if you will. Right? Sammy. Yeah, well, you see, this is the same thing they did at those palaces in Assyria, which is that major threshold. There would be a statue, but also the Egyptian temples. Remember, this is a temple, not a burial site, because it's sepulchre. Okay? One of the things that we see in Egyptian temples, first we have this idea of statues at major thresholds, which goes back to what we saw in ancient Mesopotamia as well. But also, the avenue that led to the temple would be lined by seated statues as well. Sometimes up to like a mile. Well, this is Sekhmet, right? In this case, that's a question I can't answer because I'm not an Egyptologist. I can't give you the background. If you were to do a term paper, that's what you would do, right? But for an introductory level course, suffice to say that these ones, right, found at the entry to a temple, where exactly I can't tell you, and have this motif of the entwined lotus and papyrus, which we will see again in just two shapes, right? Yeah.
Where these temples, the temple to like Sekhmet, or was it a temple to? No,
usually a temple to most of the temples that I've been familiar with you're taxing the limits of what I know about ancient Egypt. No, don't be sorry, because it's good to ask questions. And it's also good for you to know that while we pretend we know everything up here, we don't. And so, that said, the temples that I've studied, preparing for classes and whatnot, right, have usually been temples to Ra. Although by this point in Egyptian history, this one is actually a new kingdom statue, 1,300, 1,000 years later, it's new kingdom. And new kingdom, Egyptian theology, this is where it gets weird for me, is that Egyptian theology sort of morphed over the centuries and over the millennia to where gods became associated with other gods and became sort of hybrid gods. And by the New Kingdom, there was the principal god was still Ra, but he was known as Ra and Amen, Amen-Ra. And Amen sort of sounds like noodles, cheap packaged ramen, Amen-Ra, ramen. I'm not making fun of them. No, we shouldn't mock other people's religion. But Amen was the hidden one. So there's an they take the pharaohs often later took the name of God into their name. But Amen was the hidden one, and I think it has everything to do with the fact that they stopped using pyramids and started using caves for the burial. Because we talked before about how the burial practice for the pharaohs was part of getting them associated closely with the gods, right? And so in the New Kingdom, as we start to bury in caves instead of underneath the pyramids, which are the symbol of going to the sun, right? We get Amen becoming much more important. So as to what these were, I can't tell you, right? I don't know if they were temples to secondary gods. There must have been, right? But I don't know enough about it to proclaim it. Right? To profess, as we professors do, right? Okay, so the lotus and papyrus here on the side. I should also mention, by the way, that this goes back, because you said, I thought that was the name of the pharaoh, that was you, right? The inscription also refers to the pharaoh at the time it was built, who was Amenhotep III, right? Amenhotep III. And he's called the son of Ra as well at that point, right? So it's fascinating stuff about this. Yeah, while you're alive. It can only be one at a time. Okay. Why did that go so quickly to this? Well, I guess I missed a slide here, so you have to deal with it. The statue of Khafra that we see here on the left came from his valley temple. Okay? So remember, the Sphinx was right outside the valley temple for the middle pyramid, the pyramid of Khafra, the son of the first of those three pharaohs, right? And this was found back up against the wall in his valley temple. It's one of like 24 statues of Khafra that were found in the valley temple. They're all damaged. This is the best preserved of them, and you can see there's some significant damage to his knee. But you can also see those Egyptian proportions we have been talking about, which is very narrow-waisted, very broad-shouldered, muscular to the shoulders and arms, and those flipper feet, right? Those absolutely massive feet. But this is, again, the Egyptian ideal proportions of the fifth pharaoh. And this statue of Khafra here helps us, or the Sekhmet statues help us to understand this a little bit better as well. These statues, these 24 statues in the Valley Temple, were designed to have been alternative residences for the soul. If something were to have happened to the mummified body, that soul needs a place to go. And so the multiple statues that were part of the burial practice were ideas of having alternate homes, so that you're assured, the pharaoh is assured to have one in the afterlife. On the right, from the Walters Museum, we see a bust from about 700 years later of Pharaoh, and in each of them we can see that standard pharaoh's headdress, which is called the Nemes headdress. This is exclusively worn by the pharaohs. Anyone who has that pleated headdress comes behind the ears and falls down and pleats across the shoulders Anyone wearing that is going to be a pharaoh. Right? Other people didn't wear the same headdress. Now, again, you say, well, what happened to the crown, the red crown and the white crown, right? That was 500 years earlier, right? Now, they continue to use them and continue to see them, but the nemes is what we see most often in images of the pharaoh, right?
You said that was the last statue of Aphrodite, right?
Sorry?
You said that that's the last standing statue of Aphrodite.
It's the best preserved of the 24. Okay? There were others as well, and the others still survive, but this is the best preserved. This one you always see, right? And it's slightly larger than life size. It's about 5.5 feet tall sitting down. So if he stands up, he's about 7 or so feet. It's pretty big, right? So I'm a little, I'm 5'9", so he's almost as tall as I am seated, right? And so we see here the nemes headdress. There's a decoration on the front of the nemes. You can see there's a little nub in there just above on axis with his nose on each of the two. And this is a snake, a cobra. Very stylized and not carved in very high relief because it would have broken off. And this is a representation of one of the many goddesses of ancient Egypt, Wadjet, who was worshipped as the protector of all of Egypt, upper and lower together. Now, this goddess Wadjet, as the protector of all Egypt, is here obviously protecting the pharaoh. Directly again over the symbol, the head is the symbol of an intellect, protection over that. But it's also what we saw before on this funerary stele, this gravestone from the Walton Art Museum, where we saw that and again, I'm still confounded. The Eye of Ra is also Wadjet. I don't get it. Yeah, I understand that. The symbolism makes sense, but the physicality of it confuses me. And it's okay to be, I'm not going to give you trace me the lineage of the Egyptian gods and how they're all related to each other. But they're all intertwined in one way or another. So that the Eye of Ra is also considered to be Wadjet, right? So in both of these cases, you're absolutely right that this is, Marie, that this is in fact the exact same symbolism, the all-seeing eye, in this case, the all-seeing snake that looks over the pharaoh in this case, in both of these two cases, and over our various people there, right? Another thing to note here, especially with Khafra, is that the beard is false. Remember, I grew up watching the old Batman TV show, that's really silly one from the 60s, because that's when I was a kid, right? And Mom and Dad wouldn't let me do my homework before I could watch Batman. And there was a character, King Tut, and he had a fake beard, and that's really what this was. It would tie onto your ears, right? And it became part of the costume of the pharaoh. So it is it's like a Halloween costume, right? But it's part of the royal costume. And the reason for it is, I think, that both it and the nemes are meant to be costume variations of facial hair. You look at the way the nemes hangs, pulled back behind his ears, and if you did that with your hair, you'd have a nemes, right? So when it hangs, it comes right down here on the front, right? I can't do the same. That's a cross, right? But, so it's not real hair, but it's a sort of a costume version of it. No, it could, but this is again it's part of the king's costume. We already saw that the costume has all sorts of symbolism when we talked about, for example, that bull's tail that we saw in Norman, right? And we'll see here that there's other things as well. He's wearing a very, very small kilt, swim trunks. But he's also holding something on his hand, we'll see in a second. These all have symbolic value. And so when we look at his nemes, part of where the designers, anybody here from fashion design? The designers, when they came up with it, are sort of giving us these versions of costume versions of real hair. It doesn't mean they couldn't grow it, although I guess, I could Donald Trump, I could switch it back if I could. But I don't think that's the reason why they did it. It's just a permanent version. And there we see on the side of Khafra's throne, there's that entwined lotus and papyrus again around the central staff, right? The same thing that we saw in that Sekhmet statue from 700 years or 2,000 years later. That same symbol for the conjoined, originally enemy kingdoms of Egypt, now one, now together. You'll also notice that his throne has lion's paws for its feet. Right? Can you see the toes down below here? Each side is in fact a standing lion, the head broken off. But there's a pair of feet here at the bottom of either side. And this goes right back to what we saw with the Sphinx, where the logic of the human pharaoh is in control of the power of nature, doing his bidding, in this case, serving as the furniture. And it's the sort of thing that really furniture designers have continued through the centuries. Why don't we talk about your table having a seat, a back, and seat? Nice and sweet, right? And think about old clawfoot tubs, right? Bathtubs with little claw feet on a ball, right? It's a tradition that really has continued through the ages, and we see it here as well. But in this case, it has a very particular symbolism that's backed up by other works of Egyptian art that say very clearly that this is really has to be considered the pharaoh in control of the power, all the power of nature. And you'll notice in his hands that one of them is laying flat on his leg, pulling out like this. The other is balled up. And some people suggested that this goes hand in hand with the idea of the crook and the flail. Fairness and sternness. Right? That the bald fist can be seen like the whip as a sign of the strength of the pharaoh. And the flat poleness is fairness, even-handedness. Right? But we'll see that the bald fist actually has other symbolisms as well. Let's see what's coming up next here. Well, there's the hand and the fist. And as you look at the bald fist, you'll notice that between the thumb's over the top of the fingers, right? And between the thumb and the finger, there's a little nub that comes up. That's the health thing. Did I talk about that on lunch? I did. I talked about it last night. Exactly. So there's our health thing. And then you can see it on the side. I've had to look for a long time to find one picture from the side. And you can see that the two prongs of the health ribbon, right? And we'll get there, right? But yeah, the two sides of the health ribbon are blowing out. And now, you see up above, we've got Horus, as Maria's identified here. There's Horus, the falcon god, the protector of the pharaohs, now protecting the pharaoh in the afterlife as well. I've always thought this was a beautiful composition. In fact, when I was an undergrad, and I like the way that the shape of the wing is really similar to the shape of the nemes. There's something like, every now and then we should step back and stop talking just about symbolism and how it's history. That's a really beautiful sort of composition, the way they worked that around and you look at it slightly silent, the angle of the arm and the way the bird stands is not quite exactly what it looks like to design around the size of the pharaoh's head. And Horus is there protecting it.
What was the fist again?
The fist straight, but also the fist holding that ribbon that is the health that we saw last week. And then the other hand flat is even-handed despair, right? And we can tie those to the crook and the flail that we saw Osiris carrying before. And there's a nice close-up. The stone here is an incredibly hard stone called diorite. It's this dark black marble with sort of light yellow veins. It's harder than marble, but it gives this really, really strong sort of presence to the sculpture. Again, as the home for his soul, his ka, for all eternity. Now, this idea of diorite, I wouldn't touch it. Don't worry about it. If you want to hang on my every word, write anything you want, but I wouldn't take it. Of course I do. Of course I do. Yeah. Of course I want you to. In Egypt, again, to paint this sort of complicated issue of Egyptian gods and whatnot, Horus in Egyptian mythology was actually born as a human. Now, how and why and when he transforms into the falcon, I can't tell you. But here we've got an image of Horus the child, who always appears as sort of a chubby little kid. And in fact, we've got a, well, chubby-ish, right? Certainly not fat, right? He's not cut like the pharaohs are. But, and sometimes he's chubbier than that still. There's a work down at the Frieder Gallery in D.C. that has him rather paunchy, right? But here he's being nursed by Isis. And it's only when he's a child that we ever see him as a human, right? The adult Horus, if you will, is the falcon. And again, how one becomes the other. I guess when we talk about theology, we should sort of just put away any kind of logic. Because theology is not about logic, right? It's all about the supernatural. We shouldn't really try to make it fit into our limited understanding that's based on physical observation. So, suffice to say, it's a difficult thing. Later much later in Egyptian art, toward the end of Egyptian art, images of Horus as a child become significantly more common. And here I think you can see he's a little punchier as well. But it reminds me of Napoleon Dynamite. The girl had that hairdo kind of on the side like that. She was, it's always sort of reminded me of that, these statues of Horus as a child, right? But Khafre, on the other hand, appeared fit and healthy. And this is all according to the Egyptian belief that the country was only as strong as the pharaoh is, right? That the fate, the fortune of the country followed the health of the pharaoh. And so this is why during life he will always appear more often than not as fit and healthy. And the entwined, and this comes from one of the attendant artifacts as well, but the entwined lotus and papyrus on the side also relate to this idea of fitness because, like I mentioned earlier tonight, after a certain time on the throne, it was 18 years, I've got it in my notes now that I can see. After 18 years on the throne, they would conduct a ritual every 3 years where the pharaoh would prove his fitness. And what he would do is called the head-fed ritual, right? And what the pharaoh would do, the living pharaoh, was that he would go to the central courtyard of the palace, and he'd go to the south end, symbol for Upper Egypt, and he'd put a crown, the white crown on him. And then they would march into the north part of the courtyard, symbol for Lower Egypt, and he'd get the papyrus crown, written white together, right? And then he would plant a stake in the ground with the lotus and papyrus in it. So it's all about reenacting the unification. And then he'd take off running, right? With the priests behind him running along. Like Bill Clinton going to get a burger, and everybody's running behind him. And this was the headset ritual. You find releases that illustrate this for us, right? It's more about just health. And, this idea, we care too, don't we? I mean, every year, presidential candidates and the sitting president will go through these, proving that they're fit, right? And not just the older ones, but you won't have the physical. We care, right? For some reason, we care, right? About the president's physical. And I think that there is a sort of a superstition about having a healthy leader that even in our much more logical days, is still very, very strong. Right? But for the Egyptians, it really was the strong belief that the fortune of the country was directly related to the ongoing health of the king. And how does it prove it? Well, he can't run the court. What if he by the time he hits the first quarter, then they're okay, maybe it's time to start. Or something along those lines. Exactly. Right. So, right, anyway, there's what he would plant. And that's why he throws a wrapper on a stake like that, right? So that was part of this ritual. Lotus and papyrus is part of this ritual. Plant the stake, and then he'd take us, there he is. That's actually, I think that might be the Zoser from the Step Pyramid. But he'd get a crook and a flail, and he'd take up running with the crook and the flail. And followed then by the priests. And so we see him, they're actually running it. And then we see Osiris again. This one from the Natural History Museum account with those symbols of pharaohhood. Right? I think that one is, yeah. Although there are other gods that appear as birds. Isis, it might be Isis. Before that name was co-opted, right? Before Archer had to change it in the cartoon series on that as well. Isis and Nephthys were related to Osiris, and Isis and Nephthys were the ones that, remember Osiris was killed by his brother, and he got torn to little bits, and he got put back together and resurrected, okay? The gods that put him back together were Isis and Nephthys, and they almost always appear as birds as well. Nephthys, Nephthys. Don't worry, they just wrote it in hieroglyphs, right? But they put it back together, so I'm betting that that's probably not Horus up there, that might be Nephthys, because he's carrying Osiris' symbols, right? So within the context. But it could be, I don't know enough to say for sure. Right? Okay. We've got some nice Egyptian stuff again locally that I think is worthwhile keeping here. Even though this class is going to Rome, I still don't want to teach this class the same way I would teach it if I was in a pupil in Canada or something, right? You should know that these things are stones. Where the Walters is free, which is quite nice as well. The same pose and purpose, it's a home for a ka, but it's not a pharaoh. Is not a pharaoh. Because only the pharaohs wore a nemes. This is a different head here, not the nemes per se. Notice that it's rounder, that it doesn't fall forward on his shoulders, it doesn't have this horizontal pleats that come across the shoulder blade. But the similarity is very similar to, and his pose is similar to that of a pharaoh because he was a court official. And the higher status that you had, the better burial practice that you were able to get as well. You'll notice he even has a flat palm and a clenched fist, even though it's been broken off. And I'm pretty sure there probably would have been that ribbon of health. Kind of makes you wonder about the people that tie a yellow ribbon and the pink ribbon that you see for breast cancer, whether or not they knew that when they came up with that for that movement. I'd like to think that they took the art history class and got something out of it. Well, with the heavy hitters, this is now Khafre's son. This is the builder of the third pyramid, Menkaure. Remember that when we looked at the three pyramids, Menkaure was significantly smaller, like about less than half as tall than either his father's or his grandfather's. And this has led some people to think, along with the historical record, that he died prematurely. Right? Is that what you were thinking as well? Make it smaller, right? But also, many of the statues that were made for this one included are unfinished. And you'll notice that the stone down below is not polished, and a lot of the stone between them and between their legs is not been cleared out yet. Right? And looks really rather rough-hewn. See the part I'm talking about? It's this bit. Whoa, halo. Sorry about that. Get my pen back. This bit right in here is unfinished, and you can see that the legs barely seem to emerge from the stone. And even if you look at part of her hip and knee, that it too hasn't been fully finished yet. And this leads us to believe that Menkaure was in fact died prematurely. Right. Right. This also came from his valley temple and should be seen to be quite the same thing, which is to say a home for him and his wife, Ka. Again, her name is fairly easy if you say it out loud, right? Khmera Nepti. But it's one of the things people really freak out on exams. If you get an R out of place, it's not going to kill you. But if you start spelling her name with an X, then you're in trouble, or a Q or something like that, right? Because it is, after all, phonetically written anyway, right? And you'll find, right, Khmera Nepti. Khmera Nepti. Khmero. See, okay, think about, hey, Tony, you locked the keys in the Khmero, right? You got Khmero, Nepti, Khmera Nepti. It's not hard, right? I cleaned that up from the way I usually clean it, right? Now, notice that as we look at them, they're again shown striding forward, and we've seen this with most standing Egyptian statues. They're shown in the act of walking. Even if it's not a particularly natural way of walking, right? Wow, what was that flash? It's not a particularly natural way of walking. It's more or less flat-footed. And furthermore, he walks more than she does. He's really quite a ways in front of her, right? Walking more adamantly. The nub in his hand, I can't tell you for sure. Sorry? And that is one long arm of the law there, isn't it? Especially the one that's in front of her, right? That sharp elbow. I've always told people just to do this. Put your elbow down, her elbow down to the side. How far across does your arm actually come? Something that's coming at an angle up, right? It's like this. To get over to reach his arm, it is, because those things you see in your arm, it's not the preference of the style of art that they make it for right angle. For really sharp, angular things. We see the way these things as well, right? Then also, we see in both of these, the way the Egyptians actually carved. Their statues were always carved from one side. They would start from the front and work their way back. Like, imagine a body laying in a bathtub and swamp flood, right? That's where the water would go. That's exactly how they would work, more or less from the front to back. So obviously, they have to come on the side. This was that. But with both of these, they would start at the front, and then here come the toes, here comes the side, and they work their way towards the very back. And since this was unfinished, we don't have it cleared out yet between his elbow and his side on either side here. Or in the center. I'm assuming that that's first. Sue?
Yeah. If he died prematurely, why is he still holding the little thing of
The house?
Yeah, the house ribbon.
And that's a good question, because I'm not 100% sure that in this case it's a house ribbon. I don't know. Because it's not finished, right? It looks like he's a metaphor. That's just carrying a journey or something behind him. But I guess let's just assume that they are, okay? Because let's assume that you're right, and every time that you are. Why is he still carrying them? Because it's not about showing what's happening during his life. It's about assuring the afterlife. Right? So he may have died prematurely, we don't know, but the point is the art is it's not a record of what happened. Right? It is an assurance of what they want to happen. Right? Sammy.
The wife?
Yes. Good question. We'll come to that.
Okay. And then, is he the last pharaoh that had a temple or a pyramid built for him?
No. But he's the last one at this place, right? At this one site. Think about
Do you think that maybe they got tired of like building?
No, but they're not. They don't get tired of anything. They're not doing it. Well, I'll tell you what I think we got tired of. Were people stealing stuff from them. You know? And so I think that the main reason is not until I'm not going to have to date exactly right, but around 1600 or so, that we begin to see the idea of burying them in hidden caves, right? Caves in the rock. But that's, quite a history than this, 1,000 years after this. So, I don't think that his is the last by any means. And again, like I said before, you guys are hearing everything I know about Egyptian art. Already. So anything more, I don't know that before. Yeah. Yeah, that's my previous point. Maybe it's details or something.
So he died.
Yes. A long time ago.
But he doesn't like.
Yes. Did you marry?
No, what he's asking is, he said he died prematurely.
Yes, they became pharaohs quite young. They became pharaohs very, very young. You know the story of King Tut, right? He was pharaoh at 9 and dead at 18, right? And he was buried at what, 11 or something like that? I mean, it's really. But again, this goes back kind of to Sylvia's question, which is why doesn't he look like it? Because, But again, I think your other question, if I can just say what I think you're asking, did she live longer than he? Why did she live with him together? These are houses for the cost. This is the day they come from and together with them. I use the word so I say he died prematurely, meaning that he died unexpectedly young. Not like a premature birth. Right? Pre-masturbation. Now, going back to your other question, let's look at it. Skip it. Skip it. Okay. Going back to your other question, is that her real hair? No. It is like his Nemeth, right? And now you can see his sideburns there underneath the Nemeth, and how the Nemeth looks as if it's a stylized version of hair. And yes, that's hers as well. It looks like like a liverwurst sausage or something, been cut off at the end. But you can also see her veins and a little bit of hair that comes around here on her cheekbone, right? Now that too is a wig of sorts. It's a costume. And as we look at her, you'll notice that she too has the same basic proportions he does, feminized, right? Broad shoulders, really narrow waist and hips, right? Very, very large feet. She's wearing a full-length blouse, and you'll notice that the artist has emphasized her well, not only that, but what parts of her body get the most attention? Breast and that triangle, right? The crotch, her pubic area. And you notice how stylized it is. It doesn't look realistic at all. It looks like she's wearing a piece of cardboard there or something like that. Oh, there's something else underneath there. That very well could be, but you'll notice that strong triangle is, again, what's her role in this relationship? It's a male-centered relationship, so her role here is to have babies, exactly, and nurture them. So that, and also to support him in his pharaohness, right? Is that a word? It is now. Pharaohness, right? In his pharaonic duties. Pharaonic is a word. It's pharaonic duties. And so that awkward arm that we're talking about is all about her supporting him. And her subtle way in which she's slightly behind him, right? But she's not. She's of the same basic proportion. Yeah. Well, maybe there's one thing we do know that, again, this is not my notes, but what we do know about the pharaohs is that they were polygamous as well. They'd have a primary wife, and they would have secondary wives. And the idea was that it was that kind of important to make sure you had, you have more than one wife, right? You give me this look like, what? No, not you, behind you. So they have a primary wife, and then have secondary wives. And the secondary wife's job was to make sure that there's a baby somewhere. And the other thing that we know, I can't have the truth here, but it comes up later, is that there's a lot of polygamy, or not polygamy, but bigamy as well. So that's what I want inbred, right? That the wife might well be the half-sister, right? And thank you! It's very common, but I don't know the degree to which it's here. I don't want to presume it's everywhere. Okay, hang on. We got something here. People in the back can't hear the question. It's just muttering. I like the idea that there's talking going on. But could you give the floor to your question? Yeah. And there was also, I know for another place where I get into it, is, this is in one of the art fixes, is Hatshepsut, who wound up being the pharaoh, the woman who wound up being the pharaoh. Right, exactly. And that was her claim to be pharaoh, was the fact that her father had told her that she would be. So it is, I think, fairly common to have incest things within these realms. I can't tell you for sure if there's any other relationship between those two, I don't know. And I think it's just dangerous at any time to presume on a few cases that it's always the case, right? Because that's where you get into stereotyping and whatnot, right? And I wouldn't know for sure, right? So, She's not exactly the same height as him, but at the same time, I think there's a certain status that she does enjoy. It's the primary wife, right? That's what I was going with that. It's the primary wife. As to whether or not he actually has children with her, I can't tell you. But this one's up in Boston, by the way. If you ever have a chance to go up there. And you can see the back of it is also fully uncarved, even areas that are just, it's interesting how it sort of flows out as part of the block. That has been carved from across the back. And again, that gives us this sense that he died early, right? Died young. We have a nice pharaoh sketch from roughly the same time. We don't know which one it is, but maybe the next generation after Menkaure, wearing the white crown of Upper Egypt in the Freer Gallery, and it's roughly life size. If you have a chance to pop down there to see it, he is. Even though the dates look like there's a huge overlap, you'll notice that the date for this one is all the way to 2180. Most people think he's of the next dynasty, which is to say that he's not closely related to Menkaure and Khafra. And in fact, his face looks somewhat different. Menkaure and Khafra shared certain similar facial features. These guys are very different. His nose has a very different set of proportions than what we see in Menkaure. And that is something that we might use to suggest that within the stylization, within the idealization that we see, there is in fact a sense of portraiture. But just a sense in that it shouldn't, I think that if he appeared in front of you, he wouldn't look exactly like this. We shouldn't expect him to. The white crown looks like a bowling pin, right? The red crown has a base that goes out and looks like a lotus flower, right? That goes out and then comes across like that and has that thing up in the back of it. That's the white, or the red crown. The white, of course, if they were originally painted, then you think, well, what's white? But they're not. And so the bowling pin is the white crown. Right? And then there's this thing called the composite crown that has a little bit of both. I'm not going to express you on that. Don't worry. It's important to remember that Narmer's wearing white because it's part of the meaning of that, right? He's upper, chicken lower, right? In that particular case. Well, nice view from the side so we can see what I was just talking about, how the facial features aren't exactly the same. In fact, I like his mustache, right? He's got a mustache going as well. Just a slight delineation of one here. And we can also see the stylized eye makeup, right, that the pharaohs were wearing. We talked about the palace Narmer being a makeup palette. Here we've got the eyebrows and coming off the sides. Here we can see the mascara, if you will, that this particular pharaoh was wearing. What is that? So really what it comes down to is that, where am I on my notes? The basics of Egyptian art don't change very much over the next centuries, right? The things that we've established here stay fairly much, dare I say, set in stone from this point forward. Many of the same symbolic elements we find 700 years later, 1,000 years later. Here we see the Nemes headdress, the cobra of Wadjet on the side. In many ways, the Nemes makes him look like a cobra, doesn't it? It almost looks like the fanning of the cobra's neck behind his head. To associate him that much more closely with the great protector of all Egypt, right? Isn't that what the pharaoh is as well, in a way? So it ends up, I think, in a certain level, making him look like that. In this particular shot from the Walters, you can see that. Interestingly, with this one, the sides are carved. You would expect to see on the sides of this the lotus and papyrus, right? We saw it in a couple other statues that had the same pose. This one we don't see it here, and that has led your Egyptologists to think that it was actually placed in a niche. Like, why carve the sides if you're not going to see it? It's not very small, actually. It looks smaller than it is. It's about like that. But they would range in size, right? Depending on their original use. And what we'll find when we get to the New Kingdom is that huge is kind of all the rage, especially for the temples in later stages, if we ever, in fact, get there. Interestingly here, he wears an amulet around his neck, and the catalog of the Walter's art collection says nobody knows why. Okay, it's not yet been determined what the symbolism of that necklace is. So there's things out there to still find out. You know, after 4,000 years, there's still some things that we don't know about these elements, and what that exactly the symbolism of that chain is still anybody's good guess. Sesostris the third has this interesting legacy in that his portrait ideal, right? Remember that these are set up as sort of maybe not looking exactly like his own ideal. Always looks tired and sad. That the lines around his eyes, he looks just weary and wiped out and somewhat older than our pyramid builders looked concerned. He's no longer youthful and expressionless. And the Egyptologists believe that this was a conscious choice, that he's trying to show him having a more human side, being closer to the people that he was governing, rather than this idealized deity. As to why, I can't tell you, but that's the standard proof on Sesostris, the sad pharaoh, right? You know, makes it sound like a band name, the Sad Pharaohs, a country band or something like that. But it's interesting that during his time period, he set the standard. Other people shortly after Sesostris also took on this sort of sad look. This one, you can only barely see it because a later pharaoh, and this was fairly common, a later pharaoh took this statue and recarved the features to look like himself, right? Changed them. And so tried to, on a certain level, wipe out the Sesostris style sadness. But you can still see some of it around his nose, right? But they tried to clean it up and make it look more perfected and ideal and aloof, like some of the earlier ones. It's not uncommon for later leaders to reuse statues of early ones. The Romans will pick up on this. Right? All over the place we'll find Roman monuments where the head of Hadrian has been recarved to be Marcus Aurelius, or something like that. And it's a practice they very much inherited from the ancient Egyptians, which we see here. Just enough time, I think, to talk about this. Amenhotep IV also presents to us one of these moments when the traditions of Egyptian art drastically change. Now you'll notice here, he's kneeling down, right? He's not broken up in these places, he's presented on his knees. And that's not that uncommon. And you can see that he's got, there's a version of the composite crown to him, right? So you see the tulip coming up, and then the thing at the top, that's the composite crown. Still got a nemes on as well, with the snake, Wadjet, on the top, and he's carrying the crook and the shepherd's flail, and he has that fake beard on as well, right? So the body style is drastically different than anybody we've ever seen, even different from Sesostris or his group. What's different about this? What sets this apart? He's chubby, right? What else? I heard something else out there. Other than he does have like almost, I hate to say it this way, in the room full of these more feminized hips. We saw the women in Menkaura's wife, right? Merioneths had sort of masculine hips, didn't she? She had that same narrow waistband and narrow hips as he had. Now we've got the poochy tummy and thunder thighs. Sorry? He looks pregnant, doesn't he? It's androgynous. But also that roundness that we see in his hips and his tummy, we can also find in his chest. We can also find in the way the nemes is being carved. Right? Look at how sharp-edged everything's been up to this point. Right? Even with the Sesostris. The angles are gone, right? That's with the numbers on. Yeah. So, and then look at his facial features as well. It's almost like a caricature, doesn't it? Almost cartoonish in a way. The lips are oversized by ratio with the rest of the body. The eyes are smaller by ratio. There's something about it that is, in fact, drastically different. This is very easy to pick out because it seems to be isolated directly with Amenhotep himself, Amenhotep IV, during his reign. He was the son of the previous pharaoh, Amenhotep III. The name means Amen is pleased. Right? The dark, the anyone is happy. Right? Amenhotep. Amen is pleased. And he began almost immediately on becoming pharaoh to abandon the traditional style of Egyptian culture with this much more radical, plastic, rounded, rubbery-looking style of Egyptian art. And the reason he did this, we can actually isolate why he made this change from 1,000 years or more, 1,500 years of Egyptian tradition, was that he had established a new religion. And he wanted images of him to represent drastic change. And what had happened under his realm is that the priests of Amen and the priests of Ra, the two primary gods who had melded together to become Amen Ra, because they were the ones who interpreted the signs of the gods, they had come to wield quite a bit of power and influence in Egyptian society. So much so that on a certain level the pharaoh had to answer to priests. And so what Amenhotep IV did was decide to just shuffle the deck, get rid of them all the gods. So pull the rug out from under the tree and say, we are no, under my rule, Egypt's going to get rid of that confusing, tetragram of gods. And not just one. It'll be easy. I'll be the central voice of the single God. Kind of like what the Mesopotamians have done, right? The single God is still the sun, but it's no longer Ra. The single God is Aten, who never appears as anything but a disk in the sky. Right? It looks like the sun. And so this is a relief also done. And you can see the same style, right? Tiny little feet, skinny little legs, and tiny little arms within it. Androgynous hips, and shoulders, and waist. And there's his wife behind him. They love that hat that his wife has got on. This is incredible. And his kids behind him as well. We've dug them up, and they did, in fact, have skull deformities, not unlike what we're seeing here. So part of it is stylized, part of it is not. They actually had sort of elongated skulls, and we think it's probably from inbreeding, right? That it's finally led to. So some of the changes that we're seeing might be that that's what his body actually resembled on a certain level, but also this change in style from what was the tradition goes with this change in religion as well. He established it. He founded the Tiny City to have his court in, had it built from scratch rather than taking the inherited city and basically said, hey, things are different now. We are now worshiping a single God, Aten, no more Amen, no more Ra, Aten, the disk that is the sun. So some traditions are in a new way. Okay? He's obviously got a problem because his name is Amenhotep. Amen is pleased. So how can you have a name that Amen is if you don't worship Amen anymore? Right? You've got to change your name. He became Akhenaten. Right? So Amenhotep IV is the same person as Akhenaten. Right? Which I think is, I don't even know what Akhenaten means. Akhenaten, servant of Aten. Is that what you said? Yeah. Did you read that from me or did you know it? I didn't. My best word. It's 6:15. Now, for we're way behind, it even takes a while to get through, but we'll. So remember that for next week, right? Definition 1. Your 2-page review of your guidebook is due. I'm going to give us 10 minutes to get into class, 15 minutes, and talk about something from your book that you found. Hey, this looks like a really cool thing to look for. We get to start thinking about the script and whatnot, right? I may also give us a little map quest sort of, get from here to there. Sort of thing as well, play with mapping and be more comfortable with reading that, right? For those of you who are doing a language for Italian was